Good job. We good, Amber? Well, good morning, everyone. Thanks for being here. I'm pleased to be here today to talk about one of Alberta's shining lights, our housing sector. I'm grateful to be joined by two of our partners today, Scott Fash on my right here, the CEO of Build Alberta, and Bill Blaze, the president and CEO of McLab Development Group. Housing has been, for the last several years, one of the great affordability and the great crises of our time across this country. It's also been one of the bright spots of our province in its great response by the province and by Albertans and by our industry. We're very excited about what is taking place here in our province in Alberta, and I think that we have been a leader and some of the numbers that we're seeing now really show it. We've really responded to the demand. Alberta is building, and we're building at an unprecedented rate. Today, I'm proud to share that in 2025, Alberta shattered housing records for the second year in a row. In 2025, for the first time in provincial history, Alberta built more than 50,000 housing starts in a single year, with more than 53,000 homes breaking ground across the province. Now, that's a very big number, but at the end of the day, it's important to remember what that actually means is over 53,000 more Albertans and their families that have roofs over their heads. That's over 53,000 more families with safe, stable places to build their future. And significantly, it's also 14% more housing starts than the previous provincial record that we set the year before. In fact, the second quarter of 2025 was the strongest quarter for housing construction in the history of our province. More than 17,000 housing starts in just 3 months. That's real momentum, jobs on work sites, roofs going up, and communities growing all across our province. And when you look at the national data, once again, Alberta is punching well above our weight. Even though we make up less than 12% of Canada's population, Alberta built nearly a quarter of all housing starts in the country last year. And we are responsible for more than 80% of all housing starts across the prairies. For the second year in a row, we led the nation in housing starts per capita. Now, what that tells me is this. Alberta obviously is on a hot streak, but it does not happen by accident. It's a result of concentrated efforts by the Alberta government and our partners, two of them that we have joining us here today. We saw people flocking to Alberta in unprecedented numbers to work here, to raise families here, and to start businesses here. And we took action to make sure our housing market could keep up. We took real practical steps to clear the way for more homes to be built faster so Albertans can find housing that meets their needs and budgets. We're updating provincial building codes, establishing construction code working groups, and launching the Stop Housing Delays online portal, a practical tool to cut red tape. We're identifying bottlenecks and speeding up housing approvals so projects don't get bogged down by bureaucratic hurdles while Albertans are looking for a place to live. And importantly, we made sure Alberta remains the best place to invest and to build. By maintaining the lowest taxes in Canada, we continue to attract investment that turns plans into projects and projects into homes. And the numbers don't lie. Our plan is working. When you get out of the way of industry, they build to meet the demand. One of the clearest examples of this is our rental market. In 2025, Alberta saw nearly 20,000 purpose-built rental starts, the highest number in the history of the province, and nearly triple what we were building a decade ago. The demand is there, and the market is responding. When supply goes up, pressure comes down, and renters are feeling it. Rent in Alberta declined nearly twice the national average last year, and today the average asking rent in Alberta is about $400 a month lower than the national average, and the benefit extends past our largest city. Alberta's communities dominate the list of the most affordable small and mid-sized rental markets in Canada, including all 4 of the top spots. This would not have been the case if we listened to others who were calling for us to go down the disastrous road of rent control. Instead, we listened to our partners who said, if the demand is there, we'll build, just get out of the way. At the same time, our government knows it's critical to ensure we have below-market housing to support Albertans with low incomes. That's why we're supporting more than 60,000 households across the province with affordable housing. And together with our partners, Alberta is investing $9 billion to support 25,000 additional affordable houses by 2031. Because at the end of the day, whether it's market housing, rental housing, or affordable housing, the goal is the same. Make sure all Albertans have a roof over their heads and a safe, stable, and affordable place to call home. I'll now hand it off to my friend Scott Fash, and the CEO of Build Alberta, to provide some remarks about the incredible work that his industry has been doing. Thank you, Scott.
So good morning, everybody. My name is Scott Fash. I'm the CEO for Build Alberta. And as mentioned, 2025 marks the second consecutive record-breaking year for housing starts in Alberta. It's an enormous accomplishment, and it's one we're celebrating because it represents thousands of new homes for Albertans and thousands of jobs across construction, manufacturing, trades, and the broader economy. In my role, I regularly speak with builders, developers, and associations from across Canada, and through these conversations, it becomes quite clear there is no better place in this country to build homes in communities than Alberta. Our regulatory environment, our willingness to continuously improve, innovate, and the support from the provincial government and many municipalities have helped our industry respond to rapid growth pressures better than any other jurisdiction in the country. But what makes this moment especially important is why it matters. Record housing starts aren't just a headline, they're a path to long-term affordability. When we build enough supply to match demand, we take pressure off of prices and rents. We create more options for families, and we make it easier for employers to attract and retain workers in growing communities across the province. And there's no better evidence than that than what we've seen in the rental housing market over the past 3 years. For more than a decade, rental construction in Alberta lagged. During much of that time, rent growth was flat or even declining, and new rental projects were a risky proposition, especially when you account for the upfront capital required. In 2022, Alberta's rapid population growth then collided with our limited rental stock, and the pressure became intense. Then two things happened. First, CMHC introduced a mortgage loan product that improved the viability of new rental projects. Secondly, the government of Alberta firmly pushed back against calls for rent control. Any form of rent control, whether temporary or otherwise, would have sent the wrong signal, muted investment, and reduced the very supply we needed most. And what happened next? Alberta built record numbers of new rental units. The additional supply is now translating into improved conditions for renters, with a 4.3% reduction in rental rates this year and an 11% reduction over the past 2 years. And with an additional 22,000 rental units currently under construction, we expect that trend to continue. At the height of the housing challenges in 2023 and 2024, it would have been easy for government to take a reactive approach. Instead, by listening to economists and industry, Alberta held firm on the policies that unlock housing supply. Generations of Albertans will benefit because we've strengthened the long-term rental stock. With more than 44,000 new rental units delivered over the past 4 years, that's more than we'd built in the preceding 18 years combined. Now, while today is absolutely a day to celebrate, it's also important to be clear there's more work to do. We need to stay focused on approvals, infrastructure coordination, predictable regulation, and building the kinds of housing Albertans need, both ownership and rental, in cities and our smaller communities across the province. I want to recognize Minister Nixon, former Minister of Municipal Affairs Rick McIver, and new Minister of Municipal Affairs Dan Williams for their engagement and leadership, especially early on when pressure was mounting and the work on identifying barriers and accelerating supply became urgent. Out of that collaboration, several key initiatives are helping to keep Alberta the national leader in housing. First is the creation of the Stop Housing Delays portal, which identifies red tape hindering housing and development, and in turn helps expedite action from various provincial government departments. Secondly, a review of the Municipal Government Act, which is looking at legislative changes needed to reduce approval timelines, development charges, and creating predictability in delivering housing supply. And finally, the Construction Codes Working Group, which is focused on streamlining our building code processes to support innovation and consistency. Minister Williams has continued this work, and we look forward to further reforms in the months ahead that support affordability and supply. And finally, to wrap up, I want to thank many of our municipalities across Alberta. We are fortunate to have some municipalities that are national leaders in housing approvals. And as we strengthen our systems in surrounding development and housing, we need to support more communities in adopting their best practices because the payoff is real. More homes, more choice, and stronger affordability for the long term. So I want to congratulate everybody involved who helped make this record housing starts possible. And with that, I'll hand it off to Bill.
Thanks, Scott. I'm Bill Blaze, the President and CEO of McLeod Development Group. McLeod's a developer and owner of multifamily rental properties, and we actively build new neighborhoods. In the capital region, we meet the needs of both the rental market and the for-sale market in these businesses. Since the 1950s, McLeod has been developing housing in Alberta. We first set up business here because of the discovery of oil in Leduc, and have stayed focused provincial government to create a place with well-paying jobs, predictable, market-responsive regulatory framework, and a focus on red tape reduction allows businesses like ours to focus on supplying housing. The business environment created by the provincial government keeps McLeod here, investing in new project, it really is a focus on supply. To remain attractive to newcomers and young people. The growth in our post-secondaries schools will benefit from more new rentals as they all look to grow their student base. And the continued growth of our workforce will benefit from new rentals. To be competitive in the world economy, we need to ensure our young people can stay in these cities, and ensuring our housing remains affordable will be key. I want to thank the government of Alberta for focusing on housing affordability, creating a favorable business climate, and allowing businesses like ours to continue to develop in Alberta. I'm going to pass it over to Minister Nixon, and I think he's going to take some questions.
Okay, that brings us to the media Q&A portion of our press conference. We'll take one question, one follow-up. And if you can state your name and outlet when you ask your question, we'll start with questions in the room. Yeah.
Sarah Reed, CBC. You mentioned, obviously you're discussing a lot of the housing starts. I know that particularly in Edmonton, there was a lot of conversation around infills. I know anecdotally through a lot of neighborhoods, there was also a lot of projects that have been started, the foundation has been laid, and then those projects have been sitting idle for what can be up to a year, and they're fairly large infill projects. So I guess in terms of sort of what these numbers actually represent, I guess where do you have the indicator of how many homes are actually finished versus the indicator that they have been started in a particular year?
Well, I mean, housing starts is where most of the national tracking is at. So obviously we show those numbers. Construction takes time. I can't speak to every specific project. I'll ask both my guests maybe to speak more in detail to what you may be seeing with infills in Edmonton. But what I will point you to is particularly when it comes to the rental sector, the fact that we are well below now the national average when it comes to rent, that we've seen rent go down by almost $400 less than national average. And the only way that happens is because we've increased supply. Driving around both of our largest cities, there's no doubt a lot of houses are getting finished. And I can't speak to specific timelines on projects. You end up in a spot though where, for the government to see results of its policies, we set out to make housing more affordable and to make sure that there are homes for everybody to live in. And when you see rent numbers and cost of housing go down at the rates that we've seen, that is a proof point that strategy is working. Now, specifically for timelines, I don't know, Scott, or which one you want to try, or both of you?
Yeah, I mean, I can try. Yeah, the way the statistics work from the CMHC is, as a foundation's poured, that's considered a housing start. So yeah, I can't speak to the specific projects you might be talking about in Edmonton, but I don't think I've heard from a lot of the municipalities I interact with that this has been a bit of a proliferation or an issue. Certainly, if the bigger the project, the more complex it can get in terms of both financing, construction, all of those things. So, yeah, without knowing the specifics, I can't really speak too much about it, but happy to speak to it at some point if you'd like to talk more about it. Definitely, you might have more.
Yeah, I mean, I would add a couple things. We've never had a project that's sat at a foundation stage, but probably you can find that somewhere in both major cities or throughout the province. When you look at the housing starts numbers, as Scott said, the starts mean the foundations started. That supply obviously comes on months after it's started, so a homeowner can't move in until it's totally finished. And depending on the size and scale of the project, it takes time for that to happen. Houses take 6 to 9 months to construct. Larger multifamily rentals take 12 to 18 months to construct. Some of the bigger ones take, 30 to 36 months if they're multi-stage, couple hundred units. So that's kind of the framework on how I would see generally projects rolling out.
Do you have a follow-up?
Yeah, a little off topic, but we've obviously had a lot of talk of hospitals and the capacity that we're seeing there, and patients who kind of have been dubbed as bed blockers because they need to be moved into long-term care and there are no spaces available. So I guess what is your ministry doing to address that issue?
Well, alternative level care patients, commonly referred to as bed blockers, is the highest priority of the assisted living side of my ministry and of Assisted Living Alberta, our organization who runs it. We've been laser focused since we took over on September 1st, so just a few months ago. And we've seen some of the best results on that issue, show the way forward to the next stage. Since we took over in September, we've had the equivalent of continuing care spaces over the last 4 or 5 months of the entire Red Deer Hospital bed spaces of new capacity onto the scene. We've reduced the numbers of ALCs in the province by 20% in 6 months. We've reduced the waiting list for continuing care in hospital, so ALC patients that have been assessed as needing continuing care that are in the hospital waiting to go, by 40% over the last 4 months. We've seen a 22% reduction in ALCs in Edmonton alone, and we are now, for the first time ever, below the national average when it comes to ALCs, which is 20%. We're hovering right now around 15%. We want to go lower. We are very focused on what that process will look like. But the steps that we've taken over the last several months have alleviated significant pressure. The pressure is still there, but if we had not done that, we would be running with numbers way higher. One of the challenges that we have, and I believe this is a proof point for the health refocusing, is that each government, both PC governments, NDP governments, United Conservative Party governments, have increased continuing care spending and capital spending in the provincial budget that was given to AHS every year. But AHS did not increase capacity with that money. We don't know exactly what they use that money for. That's a conversation probably for a different minister. But the point is the investment was coming from multiple different governments and was not being spent. We recognize that, and when we took over, we started to make that investment, make sure it was going towards those continuing care spaces, which has resulted in significant reductions. Now, what we have to do is 2 things long term. One is to continue to increase acute care capacity, which I know Minister Jones has spoken with you guys about yesterday. But at the same time, my department must keep up at the same rate of demand for acute care with the same amount of continuing care beds that we need to be able to make sure ALCs don't become the long-term problem in the hospital system going forward. And that's why just before Christmas, the Premier and I announced the largest continuing care capital investment in the history of the province. We have something like 1,800 more units under construction as we speak, continuing care spaces across Alberta. We've committed to 1,500 more a year minimum going forward for the next decade, including both operational money and capital money inside that space. And so with all those investments combined, and the fact that the policy changes that we have put in place already in the system are seeing massive reductions in ALCs, we're confident that we're not only going to continue to be below the Canadian average, we're going to set the new Canadian standard. When we're finished this work, people are not going to be stuck in the wrong bed receiving the wrong service. And that's the good news. That's what we need to be focused on. The Premier and I have spoken up here a couple times about some of the people we found early days that have been stuck living in acute care beds for years, not months, years inside the wrong space. We don't have anything like that taking place inside our hospitals no more. Nobody above 300 days. And we're on track, I think, to very shortly have nobody above 100 days. So these are positive things, but it doesn't take away from the fact that this is a real pressure that has to be dealt with, which is why the government's taken action.
Can I just follow up on that? So Dr. Raj Sherman says at any time about 15 to 20% of patients in ERs are those ALCs. They need home care. They need some sort of other level of care. Is that the number that you're seeing right now? And is it possible to get to 0, or is it there always going to be like 5% that are in there? Is that the goal?
So it's a good question. First off, those numbers would be very inaccurate. And I want to be clear, it gets confusing because there's so many different aspects of the healthcare system, but there are no ALCs inside an emergency room. If you're in an emergency room and you need care, you're not an ALC. And just hear me out on this. I mean, this is very important. An ALC means that you've received acute care at some point. You needed acute care. You no longer need acute care. You need some other type of community care, but that community care is not available to you for whatever reason. And so you're in a hospital bed, in an acute care bed, waiting to go to another service that you need. In the emergency room itself, you're an acute care patient still. So what's happening, how the ALCs impact that, is further along in the system when there's ALC patients who can't get into another spot, they're holding a bed that's stopping that emergency patient from going there. So there's no statistic that would show you any ALCs ever inside the emergency room because they're in acute care need. And the number that we're seeing is nowhere near that number across every hospital. Again, we've reduced it to about 15% on average, below 13% in most of our largest hospitals at the moment. And so we're seeing it go down. But we are still seeing it that we need to do more work. To answer your question, no, it's never going to be zero, and no system would ever get to zero. I mean, all of us who have been in the hospital, maybe had surgery or something have gone along like that, have been an ALC. You may be an ALC for an hour, you may be an ALC for a week, you may be an ALC for a month, depending on your unique circumstances. But in some ways, an ALC is the finish point of the acute care system, right? You went there for acute care need, they've solved the acute care need, and now you're an ALC waiting to go to either to home or to where your next destination point. So it's not that we could ever get to zero, nor should we try. It would make no sense. What the focus needs to be about is making sure that everybody who is in that circumstances is leaving the hospital in a reasonable time. Our goal right now is to get anybody above 300 out, anybody above 200 out, anybody above anybody above 100 days out. Long term, our goal will be to make sure there's nobody in the hospital longer than 30 days, and ultimately that the vast majority of people are discharged within 72 hours, and that's what we're working towards. Again, we're seeing steady progress towards that, but it's not about eliminating ALCs. It's about making sure that ALCs are not stuck in the system any longer than they need to be.
So the NDP, some doctors, now some unions are getting involved, saying that the Premier needs to declare a state of emergency and recall the legislature for an emergency debate to work on some urgent solutions. Do you see any merit in that? Would you be willing to do that?
You know, I've been here for a long time, sat at the table during COVID. I've seen tough years, tough flu years, different issues like this. This was a tough flu year for a variety of different reasons. I know Minister Jones has talked to you about that. And the system has been under strain, as it is often inside flu seasons. But the reality is that every number that we're showing is that the decisions that have been made in advance of this flu season have resulted in the metrics that we're looking at going down. The measures that we're putting in place are already having the impact on the system. And so what we need to do is continue to be laser focused on that and making sure that we continue with those investments so we can continue to see the results. Again, in 5 months, the individuals who are ALCs inside the healthcare system who have been designated as needing continuing care, going into assisted living, who are stuck inside the healthcare system and can't leave, has been reduced by 40% just in September alone. And so there's the measures that we would need the legislature for, we've already done. We've already passed that law. We've already put that money into the system. We've already invested in those buildings. And we're going to continue to see that capacity come online, both from the acute care and the continuing care side. And these numbers are just going to continue to get better each and every day. The Premier is laser focused on making sure that this works. She's speaking to doctors constantly. She's speaking to all of her ministers that are working in the system, including myself, on a daily basis to make sure that this trajectory goes this way. So to answer your question, no, I don't think calling back the legislature and spending a bunch of money and bringing everybody back into there to talk about something we all agree has to be fixed. We all already have put the money in place to invest in, and we're seeing metrics that show that investment is working, is going to help at all. What we need to do is make sure that we follow through on our commitments and make sure that we continue to create more space inside both systems, which is what the government's doing.
Yes.
Catherine Ludwig, Global News. To build off of that, the big conversation going around in my newsroom right now is where has the Premier been? It feels like she's been MIA. We've tried requesting her for multiple different stories. She hasn't been in public or done presses or anything like that. Where is the Premier right now? Well,
you may feel like she's missing to you, but it sure doesn't feel like it to me. The Premier is in constant contact I can tell you with me as a minister, multiple times a day, I've already spoken to her today. She's usually amongst my first texts or phone calls a day. And so where the Premier right now is she's working hard to make sure that her cabinet and her government are continuing to deliver for Albertans. And when it comes to healthcare, as we just talked about, you're seeing that her push delivers significant results. Again, the lowest ALC numbers anywhere in the country, the lowest ALC numbers in the history of the province because of the work that she's done. We're here today announcing the best housing numbers in the history of the province underneath the leadership of this Premier. The greatest crisis of the last several years in Canada, arguably took down a prime minister at one point, a situation that is creating a deep affordable crisis everywhere else in Canada. And because of the leadership of this Premier and this government, you're seeing the best results anywhere. So the Premier's here, she's working hard. She continues to lead both her cabinet and caucus and make sure she's delivering for Albertans.
And why hasn't she been in the eye of the public then? Why hasn't she come talk to the media, especially in light of Mark Carney's recent speech, which was pretty powerful, saying that Canada has what the world needs. A lot of that comes from Alberta and what Alberta has to offer. Why hasn't she come out and talked to the media and even responded to that?
Well, I mean, anybody who would imply that Premier Smith is not working is not paying attention. This Premier is constantly on the go, is everywhere in the province. I don't know how she does it. Working around the clock on multiple issues. We talk about federal government. She delivered an unprecedented memorandum of understanding between Alberta and Canada that has resulted in some of the biggest economic issues that could hurt our province, cost upwards of 100,000 jobs, something like the production cap that was being pushed forward by the former government, that she has delivered and moved the metrics on. She's moving the metrics on healthcare in a positive way. She's moving the metrics on the economy in the positive way. She oversees the most affordable province in the country, the best housing market in the country. All I can tell you is our Premier works tirelessly. We're lucky to have her, and she is fulfilling the mandate that she's been given by Albertans, and I have no doubt you'll see her soon.
Yeah, so on the topic everybody's talking about, I heard the capital investment, but one thing the Alberta Medical Association has said is through this health restructuring, they used to know who to call up when it was time to discharge those alternate level care patients to to a continuing care, let's say, and now there's the staff who they want to be working evening and weekends. They're having trouble getting people out on evenings and weekends. And then meanwhile, when they are discharged, there's staff who work either in continuing care or community placements who say the staffing ratios are dangerous. There's patients with dementia or mental illness who have a history of violence, and workers shouldn't be working alone, and they're forced to work alone because there isn't the staffing levels. So what can you tell me about what you're doing in the staff side?
I would point you to yesterday and a previous press conference that Mr. Jones and team have had with Acute Care Alberta, Alberta Health Services, in which officials have made clear this is the most communication they've ever seen through these divisions ever. And in fact, communication is up. I can tell you that the leadership of Assisted Living Alberta and Acute Care Alberta are in daily communication about things like ALCs, as are the ministers. One of the things that we saw was a real challenge was there was actually not appropriate staff inside the emergency rooms to deal with issues of diversion. Social workers were going home at 11 o'clock at night and not there to care for the homeless, as an example. That we switched in the last couple of weeks to be able to make sure we have staff there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The communication amongst these departments is significant. And again, I'm going to swing you all the way back to what I talked about capital. Think about that. Governments of multiple stripes, political stripes, every year going into the budget and saying we have to keep up with continuing care investment. We put that money in there, otherwise we're going to have a problem. And then AHS did not spend that money. Clearly, there was not real good communication taking place in long-term planning if that's what was taking place under multiple governments. That alone was a reason for us to break this into different levels of leadership. At the end of the day, when you see a reduction in something like ALCs by 20% in under 5 months, 40% specifically on continuing care clients waiting inside the healthcare system, the only way that happens is because communication has improved, because policies have improved, because resources have been put and invested inside the system. With all due respect, the system before that wasn't able to do that. It had the highest numbers that we'd ever seen. They weren't showing any reduction. They were continuing to show ALCs going straight up through the roof. And by putting in these different systems, we're seeing that level of cooperation with focused leadership on the areas that people are responsible for that's resulting in people being discharged. And I believe the numbers speak for themselves, particularly when it comes to the continuing care sector. When it comes to staffing, I'm proud to have been part of a government that increased the staffing levels in legislation, tripled what it was underneath the former government of what the requirements would be, put in a licensing system to be able to make sure that those that standards were being met, put in an inspection system where we go across the province to be able to make sure that those standards are being met, and we're going to continue to do it. When we announce capital, the investment to the level of capital that we're talking about, that comes with an investment in long-term operating to be able to make sure that all those facilities can operate. We also, through public bargaining, have been able to increase and come to good agreements with our nurses, our LPNs, and others very, very critical staff that we need to operate those facilities, which has brought labor stability to this area, which is going to continue to improve the situation for years to come. So at the end of the day, you got the investment, you're seeing results from said investment, you got the government's commitment to continue that investment, and I think that's very exciting for the system overall.
And on housing starts, the Calgary Real Estate Board issued a forecast, and there's some things in the future. There is the MOU, which is sort of the upside, but then there's uncertainty with the CUSMA renegotiations, as well as dampened oil prices. And so for whoever wants to answer, how do you think the uncertainty of the coming year will affect housing starts?
Well, look, you can't have record-breaking years forever. I mean, records are there. I think the situation is slightly changing than what we were facing a couple of years ago. What we need to do, and I'll check with my colleagues if they want to add anything to this, as a government, though, is recognize that tariffs and other issues are going to have impacts, and we'll see how that proceeds. And I don't think there's anybody on the stage that can tell you they can control that situation for obvious reasons. And we're going to be in a spot we're going to do our best with it and respond to it. But there's the other issue, what's happening in the United States, which is frankly the largest deregulation that we've ever seen. And so what we need to do as a government is continue our focus that you've seen with housing, but in other sectors, to make the most regulatory friendly environment that we have while still protecting things that we care about, like the environment, so our industry can succeed. And really at its core, I believe that's where the core of the housing success that we've seen is that we went to the industry, we said, what do we got to do? There's more to do, as both these gentlemen have said. But we sat down, we started making a list of things that needed to get fixed, and we just started to systematically fix those issues to allow our industry to do the job. And so as you look into the next year, we need to continue to do that for housing, but we need to continue to do it for every industry. We need to respond by not only making us tax-friendly jurisdictions, which we've done, make us affordable places to live, which we've done, but continue to make us the best place to do business. Continue to make sure that our regulations are going in a trajectory that protect Albertans, but also allow industry to do their job.
Yeah, I think we expect this to be a bit of a transition year in terms of starts. Not expecting a record-breaking year, definitely some moderation. A lot of unknowns, whether that be tariffs, whether that be population growth. We know that's going to dampen slightly. Another big thing we're trying to monitor is the impact of the federal GST rebate on first-time home buyers. We were expecting that to have come in about a year ago. It's yet to happen, so we're kind of unclear what impact that's going to have in terms of the purchase market. Our expectation is that there's quite a few people who've been sitting on the sideline waiting for that 5% rebate. If I was looking to buy a house for the first time, I'd be waiting for it too. So I think we'll see more back to our kind of 10-year average numbers. Still healthy market, but nothing like the record-breaking levels we've seen. Would love it if we, again, keep seeing that growth and that demand. That'd be great for everybody, but at the same time, I don't expect it this next year.
Okay, we're going to move.
Actually, I'd add one thing to that, if I could, Amber. We also need our federal government partners when it comes to housing. And when I'm in talks with the federal minister about this, as other ministers are across the country, to recognize that the great success that we've seen specifically in affordable housing investments is because of one of the great partnerships actually between the feds and the province. This has been an area where there has been a lot of agreement. And with our municipal colleagues, both the former mayor of Edmonton and Calgary and the current mayors have been incredible partners and mayors all across the province to help us see the results that we've seen. But particularly when it comes to affordable housing, the reason we've seen so much success on the investments is that the Affordable Housing Partnership Program between the provinces and the federal government has had great success. And as they go to rebuild some of the focus that they're doing on housing, we're excited about it, but we don't want them to lose sight that it's not just market. We talk a lot about the market, that's very important, but we need to continue to make sure that we're inserting into that system those very specific affordable housing units that we're building for things like continuing care and for things like fixed income seniors and families that need affordability help.
Okay, we'll now be going to questions on the line. Operator, if you can put through our first caller.
The first caller is from Josh Hall from RD News Now. Your line is now open.
Hi, Minister. Josh Hall here. Last summer, the city of Red Deer found itself in an unenviable situation that saw it persuaded by the community to turn down $12 million from the Federal Housing Accelerator Fund through the CMHC. Earlier this month, the city has been told by Ottawa it needed to return some of that money because it was deemed non-compliant with the agreement that they had. Is the province tracking this situation, and does it support Red Deer's actions? As well, how do you think the federal government can improve this process for municipalities which don't want to make sweeping changes to zoning in order to get money for critical housing projects?
So yes, we're tracking it closely. We're in contact, obviously, with Red Deer. Calgary has seen some similar conversations taking place. We're in close contact with them. We definitely support Red Deer. We definitely support Calgary on this issue. I understand what the federal government is trying to accomplish in principle about trying to create a regulatory environment that will continue to allow us to build fast. Same thing we're doing here. But we don't believe the way to do that is to over-regulate municipalities to do their job. Instead, we want to be focused on finding ways to remove barriers to specific projects, but then also in general, and again, creating a way that industry can do their job. And my argument to the federal government and the CMHC that we will be making and are making on behalf of our cities who find themselves in similar spots that Red Deer is in right now is the proof is in the pudding. If they are looking for housing results, permit results, and speed of construction, Alberta is leading the way. And maybe if they want to see that result elsewhere in the country, it's probably worth taking some time to stop and say, how is Alberta succeeding to accomplish that, rather than over trying to regulate municipalities who need to figure it out. There are very different circumstances in each municipality, and for all the way in Ottawa to try to figure out how to do zoning issues, I think is probably very problematic long term. Speaking as an MLA who represents something like 34 towns, counties, and school boards, I do know that there's a lot of differences between each of those communities, even from a geographical perspective. And I'd rather just tell our municipalities what we think we need, what we expect of them as far as results, and then get out of their way, just like I do out of the industry's way, and let them get the job done. So I should say we are, just to be clear, specifically when it comes to Red Deer, I don't believe Red Deer should give any money back, and we will continue to stand by, side by side with the mayor and the rest of the city council in Red Deer in their communications with the feds until we get this issue addressed.
Do you have a follow-up, Josh?
Yeah, thanks, Amber. Minister, I heard you speak to affordable housing. You said that it's a priority, but prices of everything continue to increase. That includes rent. Some of the rent increases I've heard from people having experienced in recent times are, quite frankly, outrageous. So what is the province doing or considering doing to ensure rent is actually going to be affordable for people who are going to get into those affordable units, and that it will remain that way for years, and ensuring landlords aren't gouging people?
So, again, this is the whole point of what we're talking about today, is that we recognize this was a challenge, and we focus on being able to create more units. The rent challenge is a supply challenge. There's two ways that you could address this. You could turn around and do something like rent control, which would stifle supply and then long term would create a bigger rent challenge, or you can focus on building and creating a situation that industry can do its job. We did the latter, and in 2025, Alberta's rent decreased by nearly twice the national average, 4.3% down all across our province. Nowhere in the country is seeing a result like that when it comes on rent. When it comes to smaller communities, like where you and I are from, we have, again, the top 4 small to mid-sized cities affordable or communities on the affordability scale are in our province. We have the 2 largest cities, most affordable largest cities anywhere in North America on most scales, Edmonton and Calgary at the moment. So while, yes, rent has been a challenge, it's been a challenge anywhere in North America and particularly in Canada, it's how you fix it. And our position is that we had to fix it through supply. You're seeing the supply come online. You're seeing rent stabilize as a result of that decision. And we expect that trend's going to continue on the rent side, and that's good news. I also got to point out, I mean, these numbers are big, so it's hard to totally absorb it. Having the most purpose-built rentals that have ever been built in the history of the province has a bigger impact on rent long-term than anything else that we can do. So again, our focus on supply is working, and we're going to continue to do everything we can to make sure that continues. Now, there still are others who are going to fall through the cracks where they need some help with affordability. This is why we're investing $9 billion, creating 25,000 more affordable spaces. It's why we have 82,000 affordable houses that we subsidize a year. It's why we have programs like rent supplements instead of rent control, so we help people pay their rent instead of stifling the industry by bringing in rent control. And we're going to continue to make those multi-billion-dollar investments in the space to help individuals. But at the same time, we're going to continue to create an environment that industry can do their job, that deal with the bigger problem, which is making sure we have enough housing supply long-term to keep both our rent and our houses affordable.
Okay, we'll take one final question.
Oh, go ahead, Scott.
No, I think I just add what we've seen kind of through the past 3-4 years is a lot of activity and growth in Calgary happened kind of year one. Then it was Edmonton right after, and now we've seen over the last year and a half, a lot of that happen in our mid-sized cities. So to Bill's earlier point, a lot of this purpose-built rental takes 12 to 18 months to get online. So I think we're still seeing the lag of that effect in a lot of our mid-sized cities where a lot of that product is now being built. And if you look at the housing start data for Red Deer, for Lethbridge, for Medicine Hat, for Grand Prairie, a huge uptick over this past calendar year, and a lot of that is in the rental space. So you are going to see the lag, and you are going to see those rental rates come down over the next year and a half as that rental product comes online. It just happened a lot faster in Calgary and then Edmonton.
Nice. Okay, one final question from the line.
Next one is from Chris Barca from the Calgary Herald. Your line is now open.
Hi, this is a question for Bill. Bill, given the slowing population growth in the province, what is your company's own outlook for new housing construction and for staffing in 2026?
Thanks for the question. We continue to be bullish. It's as Scott mentioned, we're not expecting it to be as strong as it was previously, but certainly bullish on Edmonton, on Alberta, and continue to invest here. Really our staffing levels haven't changed substantially over the last 18 months. Continue to look for really good growth potential in Alberta. A little quieter right now, but certainly the housing market continues to be the most attractive place in this province to invest our capital, and continue to see that relative to other places in this country.
Do you have a follow-up?
Yeah, this is a question for both Bill and for Scott. Is there any concern here about excess supply right now entering the market? Are you seeing a backlog of unsold homes or any other signs of rising inventory levels that maybe give you pause for concern?
People tell me I answer quickly, but the answer for me would just be no. I'll turn over to Scott. He can give more details.
I think it depends on the product you're looking at. Rental, I'd say it's very safe to say we have a very healthy supply that will be online once the 22,000 units currently under construction are finalized. So that's why we're starting to see rentals rates decline. Our supply is actually matched, if not surpassed, demand, which is going to be great news for renters. That's why rentals gone down 4% this year, 11% over the next 2 years. I think when I mentioned we expect a bit of a transition year this year, it's because we're trying to figure out what to expect on the resale side. And I don't look at the same metrics Bill would. He'd be looking at much more complex information than I would. But really, I think we still expect there to be a strong resale market, mainly because we haven't actually been building that much more resale than we have historically. So much of our housing starts and so much of our record-breaking numbers are based off of rental. We still think we've been keeping healthy amounts of construction on the for sale side, but nothing that to a level that would concern us.
Okay, that is all that we have time for today. If we didn't get to your question, my contact information is at the bottom of the news release. Thank you so much.